Bom dia a todos, espero que agora toda a gente me consiga ouvir. Em princípio eu gostava de vos agradecer o convite feito, agradecer à Universidade de Aveiro no Vice-Reitor Paulo Villarreal, agradecer também a presença do Secretário de Estado do Ambiente, José Gomes Mendes, e obrigado ao projeto por nos terem feito o convite. É um prazer para mim poder estar convosco nesta sessão. É pena não estar fisicamente, tenho boas recordações de Aveiro, sobretudo os ovos moles, fica para uma outra oportunidade. Mas de qualquer forma é muito gratificante poder estar neste grupo e poder participar convosco deste workshop. Feitas as apresentações em português, vou fazer a passagem para inglês. So wishing you all my colleagues and the CISMOB project and all the participant member states in the activities, a very productive day, a very fruitful discussion, and we expect good outcomes, of course, from your activities. I was invited today for giving a presentation about intelligent transport systems and how to go from science to policy and policy to real world. To be honest, I'm not sure if this is how the real world works, from science to policy and to policy to real world. There is an obvious link from the science to the real world. The policy is just an enabler for making sure that we have the right resources and the right research to tackle the real issues for real problems in life. I come from DG Move. I've joined DG Move now for a little bit more than 2 years. Unit before, it's a unit for sustainable and intelligent transport, and it's actually I believe one of the most important units in DG Move, because it supports a lot of our policies, our transport policies. We give support for 3 ongoing directives, from the Clean Vehicles Directive, alternative fuels, and also intelligent transport systems, looking at cooperative and automated systems in the near future. It's such a large, wide scope of topics that recently we've had a team building exercise to come up with a shorter definition of what our mission statement is all about. But before doing that, I'll just share the screen and start my presentation with you. Let me check if I can do this properly. I hope so. So obviously one of the most relevant elements for the transport is related to data, and digitalization of transport is a key element in our daily lives. Together with the decarbonization and the alternative fuels, Clean Vehicle Directive, all of these topics come together to support the activities that we have now. And after discussing internally of how we could put in short sentences what we do here in DG Move Unit before, there's now a proposal for our mission statement, which is kind of like beyond borders, beyond silos, beyond modes, ever greener, safer and efficient, more active, decarbonized, intelligent, connected and digital. Our mission is to strive to bring European citizens, cities, governments and businesses the mobility of tomorrow. Basically, this is what we strive to do, and all our actions come together for that purposes. Now, because we are in a session regarding intelligent transport sector, intelligent transport systems, it wouldn't be fair not to start mentioning the ITS action plan, which is now more than 10 years old. It was published in 2008, and it foreseen 24 actions, priority actions that you can see here in the slide. And these priority actions have been regarded through several work programs across the years, and have derived for the publication of policy frameworks under the ITS directive, which we call the Delegated Regulations, that I'll present you in a short after this slide. Overall, what we are trying to tackle are four key elements that you can see here: the optimal use of road traffic and travel data, the road safety and security, the continuity of traffic and freight management, and linking the vehicle with the transport infrastructure, and that comes together with what we call now the cooperative ITS systems. And around all of these four priority areas, we of course try to tackle and bring from the science to the policy, and from the policy to the real world, the data formats, tackling the data interoperability and the data sharing mechanisms, how to approach a quality framework that will allow us to provide added value services for the European citizens and businesses, how to make sure that those services are continuous and interoperable across member states, across borders, across cities. And it all comes together in what we call this digital layer that is provided through the national access points, which act as like a central linkage with all the data flows can be reached and can be then reused for the purposes of providing better and more efficient services. As I was saying, from the directive, so far 5 delegated regulations have branched out, and you can see here from the top priority action A, which was the last one to be adopted October last year, and it's the one that I'm going to present as a use case to share with you how we go from science to policy and from policy to the real world. I'll try to cover the whole history of from drafting to making sure that the implementation of this delegated regulation is going to go through according to the policy that we've delineed. But before that, we had priority action B, which was regarding real-time traffic information services, and priority action C related to safety, universal traffic information, free of charge to users. Another very important delegated regulation that will come into full implementation in October this year is the e-call, EU-wide interoperable emergency call, that will be mandatory for all new commercial vehicles to be sold with this device on board. It acts like a SIM card, and it deploys a 112 emergency call to a PSAP, making sure that the medical emergency rescue teams get to you as soon as possible. And we hope to save a lot of lives with these devices from now onwards. Also, priority action E and F, mainly regarding the use of and the intelligent use of safe and secure parking for lorries across the TEN-Ts, making sure that the drivers get their resting times and they don't get any issues trying to find an available spot for parking their lorries and comply with the resting times that serve the purposes of freight. In common amongst most of these delegated regulations, you have this definition of what is an access point. And the next slides come up with this broad definition of what an access point is, covering delegated regulation 885, 886, and 962, and the last one, the multimodal, the 1926 from 2017. And you can see that they all have in common this need for accessibility of data, availability of data. They have concerns about what the format of the data should be at that point of exchange. And they all are designed to make sure that that data can be exchanged and reused for the purposes of interoperability of the services. So the national access point serves as a mechanism for accessing and exchanging and reusing transport-related data. And for our point of view, it's the basis to support the establishment of a digital layer that interlinks all the elements of transport and builds up this digital architecture involving open and common standards and interfaces, and efficient but secure under an efficient but secure data ecosystem. And you can see these access points coming, springing across all member states in Europe to facilitate the access and the easy exchange of those services. Our Commissioner Bulc, Violeta Bulc, presented this slide so many times, and this is an approach how you go from a physical infrastructure to the network, the digital networks of transport-related services. And you see there the second layer is already the data. So this network of national access points is kind of a network for establishing this data layer for the policy. So we've published recently, last month, the list of these national access points. It's available in our webpage. The link for future use is there also in the slide that I'm hoping that you will be able to share with the audience. And if you then click, you get access to all of these national access points and the hyperlinks that allow you to get access to this data for these purposes that I've described. And what kind of data are we looking for, or are we looking at? For Spec C, safety-related traffic information, we are looking to share 8 simple categories of data: temporary slippery road, animal, people, obstacle, debris on the road, unprotected accident areas, wrong-way drivers, so things that actually may be useful on a safety-critical situation on the road. And remembering this is real-time traffic information, and it's critical service, it's safety critical. And together with this kind of events, of course, the location, the category of the event, and also the advice to the driver are some of the prerequisites for these specifications to be fulfilled. When we come to real-time traffic informations, we are looking at basically 3 types of categories of data, from static to dynamic to traffic data. Static covers the road network links and the physical attributes, so the geometry, road width, number of lanes. The dynamic covers, the lanes, the bridge closures, the accidents, incidents, dynamic speed limits, traffic management measures. And for traffic data related information, you have volume, speed, location of queues, and waiting times at borders. And this is kind of the bulk of my presentation that I wanted to share with you, the multimodal, because it's the most broad delegated regulation that we've produced so far. Geographical Scope is all the network, all the transport network across the EU. So it goes beyond the TEN-T. It goes into cities, despite of their size and where they are located. So it covers all the transport network, and it regards 6 types of data, grouped in 2 groups, static and dynamic. And the aim is to address to identify points of interest, access nodes, geometries of access nodes, timetables, accessibility of information for road, cycle, pedestrian network. Again, car sharing, bike sharing stations, refueling points, all of this fits in those static data categories as detailed cycle network attributes and estimated travel times to foster co-modality or shifting modality for the better purposes of your mobility and the needs on your daily basis life. For dynamic data, and this is to be developed at the discretion of member states, you could expect data regarding disruptions, real-time status information like delays, cancellations, guaranteed connections, status to access nodes, platform information, operational lifts. So all of the attributes in an interface, and also car sharing availability, bike sharing availability, and of course car parking spaces on street to make sure that your life is facilitated as much as possible. And this became official under law on the 21st of October last year. You can also get the link easily in our website if you don't know it by now. Sorry. Oh, sorry guys. wrong button. And where did this all began? So this is the last slides are kind of telling you the story. How did we go from science to policy and from policy to real world, while tackling these specifications to support the provision of multimodal travel information services? So we started with defining the goals to the provision of these EU-wide services: access to data, interoperable data exchange, and interoperable service exchange, and terms and conditions for the data reuse and service exchange. These are the four main areas that the specifications cover. And the barriers we've tackled, we're dealing with the access to data and limited or difficult time consuming across the EU, the gaps in travel and traffic data interoperability across transport modes, the lack of interoperable interfaces between modes and between infrastructures, and the lack of terms and conditions provisions for public and private bodies to use as a reference, as a best practice. So we've identified a couple of solutions. Some of it, as I described, come through the setting up of these national access points to make sure that the data is accessible. The use of standards and the profiles to make sure that we harmonize as much as possible the common use of data across the EU, and to make a reference to the future standardized interfaces to make sure that we get this across modes and across borders. And also we wanted to tackle this licensing agreements, the terms and conditions, because some of this data is commercially sensitive, and we wanted to provide some guidance for the public and the private entities to come together and establish their own terms and conditions to the reuse and exchange of this data. So we've defined a baseline for these basic common provisions. So basically, this explains the story. What we do? We wanted to access and exchange at least static public and private travel data and traffic data for travel planning across all modes. And the timelines we've established, you can see here in this slide, and it's geographically a step approach as well, from the comprehensive TEN-T, including the urban nodes, to the other types of networks. And there you cover the static data sets, from timetables to bike sharing to cycling networks. And it goes from 2019 up until 2021. And then at the discretion of member states, as I said, some of this data can be then extended up until 2023. The dynamic data, member states choose to include or not that in the national access points, but they are encouraged to follow the above time frame. And how do we do this? So we set up this national data, the national single access points. They can come with all flavors and shapes. These are some examples: a simple database, a data warehouse, a marketplace, a simple data registry. Everything is possible, and if you click the links of the page that I've previously presented to you, you will find all sorts of data of national access points for providing access to this data. Some of it is not open. Some of it will have to go through terms and conditions for the reuse. It doesn't necessarily mean it will cost you something, but at least you have to come to an agreement with the entity that is now responsible for providing and giving you access to this data. For instance, if you're talking about safety-related traffic data, you can imagine that hardly this is to be understood as open data. So there's a certain degree of liability in some of these data categories that needs to be tackled under terms and conditions. Not necessarily, I say again, it will cost you money. It will cost you just maybe spending some time to go through these terms and conditions, and making sure that you sign and then you use it or reuse it accordingly. We wanted to standardize travel and traffic data at the NAPs, so we harmonized across different modes and use a lot of translators. And we've identified a couple of standards to do this, as well as profiles. So for instance, in rail, we've identified the TAP TSI. For road, the DATEX and the NATEX for static data, and the SIRI for the dynamic part. transport operators. The air, we've identified the IATA and the SIM, and for the spatial data, we're building on top of the INSPIRE directive. TNITS Go is one of the program support actions that we are co-funding now for making sure that we achieve these goals. And of course, as I said again, the use of license agreements, harmonized set terms and conditions, and establishing quality criteria for delivering those services. But the multimodal travel information services is not about data, it's about services. So we want to push for member states to develop their own distributed journey planning across the EU, linking local, regional, and national services where there is a demand for it. And we recommend the use of these standardized interfaces, the use of standards to define the handover points and the contractual agreements. And we are supporting this implementation. We are fostering this public and private collaboration with providing support at functional and technical and organizational levels. And we are doing this on a phased approach. This is the overall landscape of all the initiatives ongoing just to give support to the implementation of this delegated regulation. I'll just go and focus on the left side of the screen. You see there we've recently granted 17 member states multimodal traffic information projects that cover the development of those national access points, the NATEX implementation, and if member states so wish to, the distributed journey planning. And the results we got so far here, you can see in blue the ones that already have access points set up, or the ones in orange that will set up shortly. So covering most of Europe now with these 17 PSAs. Here you can see the national access points. And those member states who have chosen to do the three things together, so the NATEX support, the single access point, and then the journey planning activities. And I can say that Portugal is doing the three of them together with the ministry where I used to work before being detached to DG Move, Instituto de Mobilidade e dos Transportes. I saw my colleague Rui Martins, and I say hi from now in the audience. So job well done, and keep going. I'm available for questions, obviously, after this presentation. Thank you for your attention.